preschool children, and just this delightful time of coming together. They dressed up in little Bible costumes, and angels came and sang to them. It was just a fun time for them to remember what the focus of Christmas is all about. And we have so many opportunities to remember that. We talk about angels. I love what the angels stand for, but at Christmas time, we watch all these Hallmark movies. Many of them have angels in there, and they're so messed up when it comes to what the Bible has to say about angels. It's fun, but the Bible has definitely something good to say. One of the movies, one of the well-known ones of all time is It's a Wonderful Life. You know this? And so A Wonderful Life, here we have George, and he's there at the end of his life. So George Bailey, he's in Bedford Falls, New York, Christmas Eve, 1945, and he's ready to jump off the bridge, end it all, because he has absolutely no hope left. It's a terrible Christmas story, isn't it? But he's there, he's ready to jump off, and God sends this angel in training. His name is Clarence. You know his last name? Oddbody. Yeah, you know that, right? Clarence Oddbody. Poor Clarence. But anyway, Clarence comes, sit down to get his training and how to restore hope in George, and also to earn his, which is absolutely not in the Bible at all whatsoever, but it makes a good Christmas story. So he gets there, he's in training, does it, and of course, he all of a sudden learns, restores his hope. It's sad, though, because his hope is restored in people around him rather than restored in God and who God is for him. But we have those wonderful stories. But I believe there's people here today, and certainly people within your sphere of influence, who feel like George this Christmas. And while some are rejoicing and excited and happy and loving the season, other people are in deep, deep pain. And we've walked with a couple of people this week who are part of our family of believers that have just suffered some horrible news and pain in their life, and it's hard. And when you come along those times, you just think, okay, we do ask that question, God, where are you in this? Where are you at? And I've been faithful, I've been praying, I've been yearning, and you just don't understand the circumstances of life that come along. And it's a horrible time to come along at Christmas when everybody else is rejoicing and happy and going on, and we don't have that hope and the joy that's around us. And we look in the Bible and we see a very accurate story of angels and Bible and God's message of hope. It's a Wonderful Life. It is not biblical in the sense of how angels are handled whatsoever, but we do see angels, and we do see messengers of God. We do see them working. So as we begin the Christmas story, we're going to start from the book of Luke. And in fact, we're going to just kind of walk through the book of Luke from now until Easter. We're just going to take a look at the life of Jesus and how he interacted. And so obviously during the month of December, we're going to take a look at the Christmas story from Luke. So we're going to start Luke chapter 1. The very first beginning of the Christmas story is an angel appearing and coming in. And let's keep in mind this setting. This is a very dark time for Israel. It's been over 400 years since they've received a word from God, since Malachi. All this time of silence, and they're wondering what's going on. There's a lot of chaos. Herod has come into rule. It's a very bloody time for the Israelites. They stepped up, tried to rebel against, and they were pushed back down. It's a very hard, painful time. And I'm sure as a nation they thought, God, where are you in the midst of all this? There's also an older couple who had been praying for a long, long, long time. And we see that they probably had a lack of encouragement as well because their hope had not been fulfilled as they had asked for all those years. What we want to see is because of Christmas, there is hope regardless of your situation, regardless of what's going on. But the hope is not fabricated in some movie, some made-up scheme out here, but it's true in the Bible and what the Bible has to say for us. So in this dark time of Israel, God has been there. God is present. I'm sure that people are saying, where are you? But he's been preparing, orchestrating, bringing about, even though Satan wants to get in and screw up and mess up and destroy everything about it, God says, no, my plan is going to unfold, and he works through it. So when God comes into this story, it's unique that he doesn't go in and prepare or reach out to the most religious people, the religious authorities of the day. He doesn't go to the wealthy, the highly influential. He does not go to the political leaders to orchestrate his plan and work through. And still today, what do? We rely on those people thinking that's what's going to bring about God's will. We're just as confused as they were before. But God chooses someone else. God chooses this old couple that doesn't have children. God chooses a teenage girl and her fiance who's a carpenter, just a plain, normal, good guy. God chooses some stargazers in a distant land who aren't even part of the country of Israel to unfold his plan. God chooses some humble, smelly shepherds to restore this good news and spread it around first. And that's a good news. That should restore a little hope that we don't have to be anybody spectacular in the world's eyes. God uses ordinary people who are humble and serve and work before him. But this story we see in Luke chapter 1 starts out with an announcement from an angel given to an old priest. Let's read from verse 5 there in Luke chapter 1. It says, in the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were upright in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commandments and regulations blamelessly. But they had no children, because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both well along in years. It says they were upright, or some versions would say they were righteous before God. It means they were doing what God called them to do. They were serving before him. They were being faithful. It does not mean they were without sin, but it says they were doing their best in honoring God. It's interesting, his name is Zechariah. Some of your versions may say, spell it differently or put an S on the end of it, depending on how you translate this Hebrew name. But he's there. He's of a priestly tribe. His wife, uniquely, Elizabeth, is also a descendant of the priestly tribe. So in that sense, they're honored by the people. They're serving God, but they have a difficulty. They've been honoring God. They've been doing the right thing, but it says they have no children. Now, today's culture, that's not anything particularly bad, because some people just don't choose not to have children. But in this culture, it was a sign of something very being wrong. Children were seen as a blessing from God. Therefore, if you didn't have children, it was a sign that God had put a curse upon you. That's what people thought. It's definitely not in the Bible. But they thought there must be something wrong with you. They'd done something wrong. Also, there was no social security system of any kind. It was important for them to have children so the children would care for them as they aged and got older. It was part of just life and how it worked. But because she didn't have any children, again, in this culture, there was a pain with that, and huge. We don't know why they didn't have pain or why they didn't have children. We don't know what was going on. Perhaps Elizabeth knows the pain that many in this room have felt of miscarriages, where you get your hopes built up and then they're lost and you're in pain. You don't understand why. Again, we don't know what it is, but certainly there was something that was difficult, and I'm sure these righteous people honored God. They were praying, saying, God, please give us a child, and prayed for it over and over. It never happened, and you felt that way too sometimes. When you're praying, you're serving, you're saying, God, this is a good prayer. This is a right prayer. Why aren't you answering this? We have to recognize God's timing many times is very different from ours. His plan is different. Remember, we have this fallen, broken world that we live in, so everything isn't going to work out just right, and our prayer times doesn't always come about that we get our wish list that we desire, especially at Christmas time. But we see God has a greater plan, and he was connected, and the thing about them is they were faithful. They continued to serve even though they did not get the answer to the prayer that they were wanting in the time that they wanted. I think it's unique. The name Zechariah, his name actually means God remembers. God remembers. And I wonder how many times Zechariah through life would have wondered, God, don't you remember who I am? I'm praying, I'm serving, I'm doing the right thing. God, don't you hear my prayers of being involved? And it's true, God does remember each one of us. No doubt the people over 400 years were waiting for another word from God. They're saying, God, you promised us Messiah. And going all the way back to Abraham and all the way back to Adam, a promise of Messiah was come. And all these years have passed, all these generations, and they're waiting. When is our Messiah going to come? We have the assurance that God does remember. The name Elizabeth means God is my oath. It means God has a promise. And God is going to fulfill the promise. And we're going to see he's going to definitely do it in a dramatic way for this older couple. But God's words are true. It's hard for us to understand. We're saying, God, it's there. And again, the people were hoping, saying, God, you promised a Messiah. Where is this Messiah? And he's promised our Messiah is going to return again, and Jesus is returning. No doubt those people through those years just kind of began waiting. Sure, he's going to come, and they lost hope. And many Christians function the same way today. It's like, yeah, Jesus is going to come back someday, some 1,000 years from now, and they don't even stop to realize Jesus could come today, in my lifetime. And if our hope was true and real, and we believed God's oath that Jesus is coming back, I believe we would shape up and live just a little bit differently. If we thought we were going to see Jesus very soon, and we will. The names are there, they're strong, and so realize that this waiting upon God is a part of life, and it just means we just need to trust God. We're just waiting on God. And we're going to trust him through all this time that his promises are true, he remembers us, and that his oath is there for us. It's going to come about. Let's go on to verse number 8. It says, once when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as a priest before God. We'll pause right there. So Zechariah is on duty. He's serving. Now, just a little bit of understanding. We see back in 1 Chronicles that all the priests were the line of Levi. They're all related in some sense, but there's thousands of them by now. They're divided into divisions. There's 24 different divisions, and he's at the division of Abijah, so he's the 8th of those. And there were so many of them that they came to Jerusalem and they served twice a year for a week at a time. So it was his turn. Zechariah came with all the others of his division. They came and they served. They did everything from cleaning, preparing, doing the sacrifices, burning the incense, all those different parts of it. When he came, so he's there. So he comes to town. They're staying for the week. They're serving, and no doubt they're very excited about this role which they're about to do. And then it says in the verses that follow that he was chosen to burn incense. You know the story, don't you? He was chosen to burn incense. And so it said his name was chosen by drawing of a lot. And it's almost we could think of like drawing your name out of a hat. So his chance was there, and this opportunity would only come around probably once in a lifetime. That he would actually not just do the cleanup and the work outside in the temple, but he actually got to go into the holy place of the temple. So it was a very special thing, and God orchestrated and worked through that. So the situation was all the people were together. It was a time for incense, and so he and a couple other guys would go in and do the inside preparations, and then he would step into the holy place where the candelabra was lit, and then he'd go over to the incense part, and he would start the incense that was there. And the incense would be an expression of our praise and our worship to God. So the burning of the incense and the smell was to be an aroma in front of the people, but certainly before God, to say, God, we are worshiping you in humility, and we're honoring you today. And the people outside the temple would see the smoke start to rise up out of the temple, and they would know that the prayer time was going on in the holy place. So here's Zechariah. His time was chosen. Can you imagine this older man, how excited he was for the first time to get to do this? He goes in, offers those, and then we pick up down a few verses later, verse number 11. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. And when Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. And I don't know if the angel had been there for a while, or maybe he just turned and saw him for the first time, but he's busy doing his stuff. He's getting the incense going, it's burning, and then he turns, and there's the angel. We see a few verses later, it's Gabriel. And Gabriel appears different times in the Bible. He's a messenger from God, but he turns, he sees the angel, and it says he's startled, gripped with fear. Put a huge exclamation mark on that. He was scared to death. He is totally frightened. No one's heard anything from God for 400 years, and now an angel appears to him in the holy place. And then going on. But the angel said to him, do not be afraid, Zechariah. It's interesting, so many times when angels appear, that's their first words, because they know people are scared. So he calms him. Says, do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to give him the name John. So it's a promise. Going on, it says, he will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. So he says, calm down, don't be so scared. God has heard your prayers after these many, many, many years, and you're going to have a son. And the verses that continue on from there begin to describe this son and what he's going to do. It says, many are going to return to the Lord as a result of this son. It says he's going to have a special vow put upon him. He's going to be set aside. He's going to be a spokesman, and in a sense, he's going to prepare the way for the Messiah to come. So he says, your son is not going to be just a blessing to you and Elizabeth as a child, but he's going to be great in the eyes of God. He's going to do some wonderful things. He's going to be great in the sight of God. Now, can you imagine the overjoyous feeling that Zechariah must have felt at that time? He's scared. He doesn't know what's going to happen. But he recognizes God is going to give them a child, not just any child, but he's going to use him in a great way for the kingdom. So it's that little subtle message of we keep honoring God even when you're waiting upon him. God, I'm honoring you, but I just got to keep waiting. And when I keep waiting, God is going to follow through. And God is going to do the right thing at the right time. Let's go on. Verse number 11 says this. Nope, I read verse number 11. Verse 18, Zechariah asked the angel, how can I be sure of this? I am an old man, and my wife is well along in years. The angel answered, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. So he said, this good news is for you. Now it's interesting, here it is, the angel appears, tells him this, and Zechariah's response was, how do I know this is true? I don't know about this. You see, we're really old, and he truly doubts the angel. Well, it's one thing, you're in the holy place, in the temple, and an angel from God is talking to you. That should be well enough to accept the promise and believe him, wouldn't you? But he has this doubt. And at the same time, on one hand, we could say, how could you not believe him? And the other hand would go, yeah, I could get this. You're old, you think, God, how could you come through on this? But he seems to really question and doubt. Now, a few verses later in this very same chapter, we see Gabriel again appearing to Mary. When he appears to Mary, he says, you, though you're not married, you're going to have a child, and it's going to be the Messiah. And she has a very similar response. She says, well, how can this be? Because I'm not even married. But it's interesting because there's a different word. Zechariah says, how can this possibly happen? She says, how will this happen? Because I'm not married. And then she responds with a couple other verses. Down in verse 38, she says, I'm a servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word. And I appreciate a man named Pat Domini. He says, the only way I can get this is, he said, I believe it's a matter of the heart, and God knows your heart and my heart. Even though Zechariah is righteous and he's serving and he's honoring, there's still something about Zechariah that just doubted God. God, I'm doing the right things. I'm going through the motions, and I believe in you, but I just don't think you can do this. Where Mary, in her questioning of God, is, wow, how are you going to do this, God? With a trust and a belief behind of it. And sometimes as we go through life, we get a little calloused. We can lose the wonder of God working in our lives and the promise is there, and it's still there. Verse 37 says, nothing is impossible with God. When we're younger, we believe that. When we get older, sometimes we forget that. And this year at Christmas, can you let that hope be restored in your heart? And the wonder of how God intervened in these people's lives and realize he can do the same thing in our lives? Zechariah, talking to the angel in the temple, when he says, you're an older couple, you're going to have a child, he should have gone, wow, we're just like Abraham and Sarah. God, you're going to do it again. Should have been filled with excitement and wonder, but instead he doubted God. As a result of his doubt, God puts him in timeout. Literally, it's a timeout, not for 5 minutes. He puts him in timeout for 9 months. He sets him over here and says, okay, you doubted me? You're not going to be able to speak for 9 months. Now, it's interesting because he says you're not going to speak, but at the end of this chapter, when we get down to the end, when the baby is born, the people came to him, and when they came to him, it says they asked him, are you going to name the baby after you? But it doesn't say asked. It says they signed to him, is the baby going to be born after you? They were doing motions. And I don't think they knew American Sign Language at that point, so they were asking him how to do it. So not only was he mute in the sense he couldn't speak, but he was made where he couldn't hear. So for 9 months, Zechariah couldn't hear or he couldn't speak. The last thing he heard was, you're going to have a baby, and why did you doubt the word of God? He had 9 months to think about that. 9 months of isolation because he didn't respond in trust to God. Think about people who are, God's given them something, and do they step into it or do they step away from it? Go back in the Old Testament, there was the time when Moses was given orders to send out 12 warriors, fighting men, to check out this new land that God's given you. So he sent 12 men, but 10 came back and said, I don't think God can do this. I don't think God's big enough. We can't take this. And because they doubted God, they missed the opportunity. All 10 of those fighting warrior men did not get to go into the land. In fact, as a whole nation, they all followed those doubts and they all began to doubt. So as a result, they wandered around for 40 years to get to where they're going to go, and all the adults did not get to go into the land because they doubted God. Sometimes I wonder if that's how that works today. God gives a promise, lays it out. Do we step in faith and follow through and realize the blessings of God, or because of our doubt, because of our questioning, we step back and we miss what God has planned for our lives? Just a thought. But it's there, and as a result, God sets him aside and says, you're going to be over here. You're not going to talk for all this time. And I get the picture then. It says, after he burnt the incense, then he came out, and the people were out there praying. And the custom was, after he'd burnt the incense, that priest who had got that incredible opportunity came out, and he was to pray a blessing over the people. And so he comes out, here's all these people praying. First of all, they're wondering, why is it taking you so long? And then he comes out, and now he can't even speak. And he's supposed to be praying a blessing. And there was a lot of questioning. So you just kind of pause a little bit. It's Christmas time. Can we have a little fun here? Please say yes. All right. So I think it's just kind of funny to think what it's going to be. So Andrew is one of our guys who on the worship team. And Andrew's kind of fun. So Andrew, would you come up here and join me? And I said, just before service started, we didn't rehearse this or anything. I said, Zechariah. I said, Andrew, would you come up and just be Zechariah for me and help the people see what this might be? And so it was just kind of a little fun. We're not making fun of Scripture. And just for clarification, he doesn't know American Sign Language. So you guys just kind of see how we do it when we don't know how to do it the right way, all right? So here we go. Andrew, you're Zechariah. You got the beard. That's a nice touch. You need a little better outfit, but we'll take the beard, all right? Okay, so, all right, it's your chosen. You get to go with the incense. Are you excited?
Yeah.
You're excited? Yeah. All right, so you go in the temple, and you go over and you light the candelabras. Not my problem. Okay, all right, you got it all done? Okay, then you go over and you burn the incense. Very, very good. All right, that's nice. And look the other way. You turn around, there's an angel. And you're scared. Really, 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 really scared. Okay, all right. Then he talks to you. And he tells you your wife, Elizabeth, is going to have a baby. So now, when you go outside, you're telling the people this. So now, you're out there, you're telling them you know stuff. So you're going to tell them that your wife, Elizabeth, is going to have a baby. No, she's not fat. She's going to have a baby. There you go. All right. Elizabeth. Okay, she's going to have a baby. And his name's going to be John. And you're excited. And then you're going to bless the people. All right, that's good job. All right, thank you. I would suggest you spend some time with Genevieve and learn sign language. That'd be helpful next time, right? Okay, so I don't know, but it's got to be, had to be incredibly scary, but the people, can you imagine going, what? You're supposed to pray. What happened to you? No doubt they probably thought something really bad happened to him in there because he can't even talk. And he's trying to express, trying to say it. I'm sure there was lots and lots of confusion. Can you imagine the rumors that would have flown around about Zechariah over the course of the next week? Similar to the rumors that would have spread around about Joseph and Mary in the weeks ahead as well. So they're coming there. He goes home. No doubt, he's so excited. He tries to express to his wife what goes on. And we go over in same chapter, verse 24. It says, after this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant and for 5 months remained in seclusion. So God's word is true. They're older in years. She becomes pregnant. Now, we don't know why she was 5 months in seclusion, but she was. She stayed there. Maybe it was just a private time. And then after 5 months, it's interesting because her distant cousin Mary arrives. And Mary comes down to the area where they're at now, down towards Jerusalem. And Mary's there. They spend time together. They talk about how God has blessed them both with this unexpected pregnancy and the babies to come. Mary stays with her for 3 months, and then she goes back home. And now it's almost time for the baby to be born. We see a response. And we get over there now down to 24, or the end of this chapter, down to 57. We see the responses there. Let's read this. It says, when it was time for Elizabeth to have her baby, she gave birth to a son. Her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had shown her this great mercy, and they shared her joy. In the verses to follow, that's when they came in and they did the signs to him and asked him what he's going to name him. He asked for a tablet. He writes out his name is John, and we said his name is John. Being obedient to what God has called, he was suddenly able to speak and hear once again. There was a lot of rejoicing. It says that the news of this spread throughout the entire region. Just a great story, just a fun story. It's a story of hope and a hope restored. The name John is laid on here. The name John means God has been gracious. And no doubt it was a true thing. So it was a name assigned by God, that it wasn't just something that Zechariah and Elizabeth chose, but God wanted them to know that this gift, this son, is a gracious gift from the Lord. And it wasn't just a gift for Zechariah and Elizabeth. John was going to be a gift for all the people. It was a gift for us today that the Messiah was going to come, and it's also a reminder that the Messiah is returning. I want to share a story. Robert McKenzie, just a simple story. He was a teacher at the Washington University, and he got to where his custom was. The bus stop was really close to his house. It went to the place he worked, and just realized I could just ride the public bus and be so much easier than driving and parking and every day and doing that stuff. So he made a habit every day. He'd walk out, get on the bus, and take it to his work. And he'd come home the same way. It was one of those days he overslept and he was rushing like crazy, and he ran to the bus stop, and he barely made it in time, jumped on his bus, and he was so grateful. And as the bus drove off, he began to look around saying, well, this is odd. All my friends who I ride the bus with, they all missed the bus today too. They're all running late today. And then he notices the people that are getting on the very familiar stops as he goes down the road, they're all late too. They're a different group of people, and something's wrong with this. And then as the bus began to take a different route to his work, he began to wonder, what is wrong with the bus driver? And he's thinking, what's wrong with everybody else? When a couple miles past his normal stop, he realized, what? He was on the wrong bus. But all that time, he's thinking, what's wrong with everybody else? You ever had those times in life when you're thinking, what's wrong with everybody? What's wrong with my wife, my husband? What's wrong with my kids? What's wrong with my parents? What's wrong with my friends? What's wrong with my school? What's wrong with this world? God, where are you in the midst of all this? I'm doing the right stuff. God, where are you? Why aren't you showing off? And if we really, truly took an honest look in the mirror, maybe it's because we got on the wrong bus. Maybe it's because we're going the wrong direction. Maybe instead of a very humble way of God saying, God, I will do whatever you want. God, I will be generous as you've asked me to do. God, I will lift other people up. God, I will honor you in every way I am. We're kind of doing the right things on the outside, but inside we are just doing our own agenda all the way. We're just doing what we want, saying, God, would you bless me, bless me, bless me, bless me? It looks right on the outside, but inside your motives, your heart is all about me. Instead of all about God and all about lifting up the people around you. Sometimes we're waiting on God, and God is just waiting on us to figure it out in the direction we're supposed to be going. Let's just review these names again real quick. Zechariah means God remembers. There's a promise in that that says God still sees you. God sees you. God knows you. God's a part of your life. God is involved in your life. A couple of verses. Would you read these with me? The words of Jesus later, Matthew 28:20. Would you read this? And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Another verse in Hebrews chapter 13. Would you read this? God has said, never will I leave you and never will I forsake you. God does remember. Whatever situation you're right now, if you've gotten on the wrong bus or you've been faithful in serving, God remembers and God sees you. Elizabeth's her name means that God is my oath. Just a reminder that God is faithful. God's faithful to those promises. And again, those people were waiting hundreds of years for the Messiah to come. When the time was right, God was orchestrating. He's faithful to what he's promised for each one of us. He's faithful to you and to me. A verse we've read often. Let's read it again. 1 John 1:9. Would you read it with me? If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. Our God is faithful, even when we're not. He's promised to be there. He's going to be there. He's faithful to us. He's faithful to his promises. Another part of the verse, it says he's faithful, but we've got to confess. And it says when we do, his grace is there for us. The name John, God is gracious. Remember that God gives us grace. He gives grace to each one of us. And that's a promise. He's faithful. We confess, we come before him, we do the right thing, saying, God, I'm going to serve you. God delights in extending his grace to you. Today, you may feel like George Bailey in sincerity. You may feel like all hope is gone and there's nothing else out there. And more than looking for some fictitious Hollywood movie, God has a message for you, and that message is true hope. Maybe you feel like the nation of Israel. You've been waiting and waiting and waiting. You just don't see it. God, are you ever going to intervene in this world and provide? And God says, I'm still working my plan. It's going to come about. Can we stay faithful to him because his promise is there? He's going to return for you. He's going to hear you. And he sees you. He's faithful. And he's gracious. So because of Christmas, there is hope, regardless of your situation, regardless of what you're going through. God, we do thank you for this story that you included. Thank you for how you worked in the lives of Zechariah and Elizabeth and how you blessed all the people then and how you blessed us today with your Messiah coming. Father, I pray for the person here today who feels like George Bailey and just truly feels like there's nothing left and they're at the end. Father, for the person who feels like Zechariah and Elizabeth, just carrying a silent pain and honoring you, but still just the hurt that's underneath. Or for the person who's just been waiting and for generations, it seems like things just aren't turning around for them, for their family. And God, I pray that you would give encouragement, that you'd speak to each one of us no matter what our situation is today. And Father, I pray that Christmas hope is so much more than lights and gifts and movies, but Father, it's true from you. I pray that each person in this room would sense and know and be refreshed by you, your love, your gift. So Father, would you just move in our hearts? Would you restore joy? Father, I pray that you give us courage to open up to you first, and then courage to open up to another, that you could speak grace into us. It's in Jesus I pray. Amen. And so while we're